in the sweltering haze of July 1945, mid the shattered remnants of Berlin's once grand boulevards, where the acrid scent of rubble and charred wood mingled with the faint, forbidden notes of swing drifting from a dimly lit dance hall, a group of weary female auxiliaries, former Helferinnen of the Luftwaffe. Their uniforms tattered and their faces etched with the strain of defeat stepped hesitantly into the flickering light. The air pulsed with the unfamiliar rhythm of brass horns and syncopated drums, a sound that had been silenced under the Reich, now echoing off cracked walls like a distant promise. This moment, in the heart of a city reduced to ruins after the brutal siege that claimed over 80,000 civilian lives and left millions homeless, marked a subtle turning point in the occupation of Berlin. The Red Army had stormed the capital in April and May, their advance a torrent of vengeance that saw an estimated 100,000 German women subjected to assault in Berlin alone, according to post-war medical records and survivor testimonies compiled by historians like Antony Beevor in his Chronicle of the Fall. Yet, as the Western Allies, Americans, British, and French assumed control of their sectors in early July under the Potsdam Agreement, dividing the city into zones, a different dynamic emerged. American forces, numbering around 40,000 in Berlin, by midsummer brought not only order but an unexpected humanity. Their G is instructed to enforce non-fraternization policies that quickly frayed under the weight of shared exhaustion and curiosity. It was here, in makeshift venues like the Tanzkampf Femina on Nürnberger Straße, where Soviet and American soldiers mingled in August 1945, that interactions began to blur the lines of enmity, revealing the fragility of ideologies forged in war. The female auxiliaries, young women who had served as telegraph operators, radar technicians, and administrative aides in the Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe, over 500,000 such Helferinnen mobilized by 1944. Per German military archives had anticipated the worst from their conquerors. Under the Nazi regime, they had been indoctrinated to view the Allies as barbaric hordes, propaganda films depicting American soldiers as gum-chewing gangsters intent on cultural annihilation. Many had witnessed the Soviet onslaught firsthand. One anonymous Berlin diarist, in entries later published as A Woman in Berlin, described the terror of hiding in cellars as Red Army troops roamed, her words capturing the dread.
Ah.
The screams of women echo through the night, a chorus of despair, expecting similar savagery from the Americans, perhaps internment. Forced labor or outright violence, these auxiliaries braced for dehumanization. Their bodies and spirits already battered by years of rationing that limited daily calories, 2 under 1,500, leading to widespread malnutrition documented in Allied relief reports. Instead, they encountered something profoundly disorienting: kindness wrapped in casual gestures. American GIs fresh from the campaigns that liberated concentration camps like Dachau and Buchenwald, where they had documented horrors beyond comprehension, over 6 million Jewish victims alone. As per Nuremberg trial, evidence arrived in Berlin, with orders to rebuild and re-educate. The non-fraternization ban, imposed by General Eisenhower in March 1945 to prevent sympathy toward former enemies, prohibited even casual conversations, with fines up to $65 for violations. Yet by July, the policy crumbled. Eisenhower lifted restrictions on speaking to adults on the 14th, acknowledging the impracticality amid a population where women outnumbered men 3-to-1 in the ruins. In the dance halls that sprang up amid the debris, fueled by black market liquor and captured gramophones, Gias invited these women to sway to the rhythms of Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman. The sound of jazz, that vibrant improvisational melody banned by Goebbels as degenerate since 1938. Its swinging beats symbolizing the unbridled freedom of American democracy, a cultural export that contrasted sharply with the regimented marches of the Third Reich. Historical records from the U.S. Army's occupation logs, preserved in the National Archives, detail how these interactions unfolded. In one report from the 82nd Airborne Division, stationed in Berlin's American sector, soldiers organized impromptu dances in requisitioned clubs, distributing rations and chocolate bars symbols of abundance from a nation that produced over 3 billion Hershey bars for troops during the war. A GI named Private Richard Mullen, in letters home, published post-war, wrote of German women approaching cautiously. They smile tentatively, as if unsure whether to trust. But when we offer a hand for a dance, their eyes widen in surprise. These auxiliaries, many in their early 20s, had spent years in auxiliary barracks under strict discipline, forbidden from fraternizing even with German soldiers outside duty. Now as the jazz swelled, its horns weaving through the cigarette smoke, they found themselves twirled on makeshift floors, treated not as vanquished foes, but as equals. One account from a captured Luftwaffe helper, interviewed by Allied interrogators in 1945 and archived in the Hoover Institution, recalled, "We expected chains or worse, but the Americans laughed and danced, their music alive with joy we had. Forgotten existed. The emotional contrast pierced deeply. What they anticipated, brutality akin to the 2 million rapes estimated across Eastern Europe by Soviet forces. As cited in Norman Neymark's, the Russians in Germany gave way to moments of genuine connection." In the Tanske Femina, photographs from August 1945 show American and Soviet soldiers side by side. But it was the Americans' easy demeanor that stood out. German women, including former auxiliaries, demobilized after the surrender, wept openly. On the dance floor, tears streaming as they were held gently, without demand or threat. A U.S. Army chaplain's diary, excerpted in The Conquerors by Michael Beschloss, noted, "These girls cry not from fear, but from relief. They've been told we are monsters, yet here we are, sharing gum and tunes." The jazz sound returned again. And again, its improvisational flair, embodying the democratic spirit, unpredictable. Inclusive, a far cry from the orchestrated precision of Nazi rallies. One woman, a former radar operator captured near Berlin and briefly held before release, later testified in denazification hearings, "The music made us feel human again. Under Hitler, we were cogs, but in that dance, we were alive, humane." Treatment extended beyond the dance halls. Allied reports from Berlin's occupation zones indicate that American forces distributed over 500,000 tons of food aid in 1945 alone, averting famine in a city where pre-surrender rations had dwindled. 800 calories per day. For the auxiliaries, many of whom were processed as posts, over 73,000 German women captured by U.S. forces by May, per War Department records, the contrast was stark. In camps like those in Utah or Georgia where some were transported, they encountered medical care that shocked them. Clean bandages, antibiotics, and meals with fresh fruit. Videos and oral histories from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum preserve accounts of these women breaking down in tears upon receiving soap and hot showers. One nurse recalling, "It hurts when I sit, from the wounds, but the Americans healed us with kindness we never knew." Back in Berlin, as the jazz echoed through summer nights, these encounters fostered a quiet rebellion against lingering Nazi ideology. Fraternization led to thousands of relationships. By 1947, over 14,000 German women had married American GIs and emigrated, according to State Department figures. Their unions a bridge to reconciliation. Yet, this transformation was not without pain. The auxiliaries' perceptions shifted gradually from viewing Americans as invaders to liberators who embodied abundance. The sound of jazz, recurring in every gathering, became a symbol of that shift, its free-form melodies representing the democratic ideals that allowed individual expression. Unlike the totalitarian control that had suppressed swing clubs and executed resistors. One Berlin auxiliary, in a post-war memoir, anonymized for safety, described how dancing to in the mood altered her worldview. "We had been taught to march in lockstep, now we improvised, and in that freedom, our illusions crumbled. Ideologically, it challenged the racial purity doctrines. Many auxiliaries, sworn to Aryan loyalty oaths, found themselves embracing the multicultural ethos of the Allied forces, where Black American soldiers also participated in these dances. Defying Hitler's racial hierarchies, as weeks turned to months, these moments accumulated into a broader change. denazification programs, mandating questionnaires for 13 million Germans, revealed how such personal interactions eroded fanaticism. In Berlin, where 70% of buildings lay in ruins, per UNESCO surveys, the American sector's focus on cultural broadcasts of jazz, film screenings helped rebuild trust. The Auxiliaries, once propagators of the regime, began to question their past. Some volunteered for reconstruction crews, their tears on the dance floor marking the death of old certainties. In the quiet aftermath, as the jazz faded into memory, one reflects on how a simple dance illuminated the essence of freedom, as that forbidden sound, born of American diversity and resilience, whispered of an abundance, not merely material, but spiritual and ideology, where humanity triumphs over hatred, where the rhythm of democracy invites all to step forward, unburdened by the chains of tyranny. In those tears shed on Berlin's scarred floors lay the seed of a new world, where kindness rebuilds what war destroys, proving that true victory resides not in conquest, but in the gentle restoration of the human spirit.